number one. Yeah, so this is Gail Simone returning to Marvel for the first time in, geez, what, 10 years? 15 years? It's been a while for her. And this is her writing Domino. And, yeah, it's like the title says. Do you want the bad news or do you want the worst news? Because there's some, like, meta elements of this comic that are kind of interesting. Stuff that's not apparent if you just read the surface of it. So, I guess I should note some technical things first. The artist here is David Baldeón, who was previously seen in the Spirits of Vengeance miniseries that they did earlier this year. And I did a few videos on that, and I was saying in it that David Baldeón, I didn't think his style fit the Marvel, horror magic side of the Marvel Universe that well, but I thought that he could be much better in a different comic, and I think this kind of proves that. The art still comes off as kind of like, I don't know, cutesy at times, but I think that this does perfectly match the tone of what they're going for, which is, energetic but still kind of cartoony. So that's a good thing. But the main things here are the story. So the story is underwhelming, to say the least. There are some people that absolutely hated this issue. I didn't hate this issue because I think I don't know, could kind of see what they were going for a little bit more, but at the same time, a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the story elements are just really annoying. So that's the bad news, that it doesn't live up to the hype that this issue was given, because this issue was seriously hyped up by Marvel. This thing had like 20 variant covers or something. I don't know exactly how many, but it was a lot. Unfortunately, my local comic shop doesn't really do variants, so the basic Greg Land one was the only one they had. But I'm sort of thinking about this issue in a meta way. So, Gail Simone, a few weeks ago, I actually did a video on it that did relatively well, given the numbers that I usually get. And it was about how Gail Simone did this Twitter thread about how to write a comic book, essentially, because she'd read a whole bunch of new comics that she just found were really stupid and annoying. And it's like the things that she was saying in this thread are basically the same things that Diversity in Comics has been saying for like over almost a year now. And she was nicer about it. She didn't, identify SJWs or whatever as the problem, but like basically the same problems that she identified were the ones that a lot of us have problems with too. So that's sort of the worst news, is that even though this comic is kind of annoying all by itself, even though a lot of the dialogue is kind of dumb, even though elements of the story are really dumb, this comic is still better than like 85% of the stuff that Marvel has done in the last 5 years. So like you see it right here. It opens with this dog, and she gets this dog as a birthday present, and it's this sad sack dog that looks like her, and she's talking to the dog. And it's this kind of awkward, really awkward, frankly, really shoehorned in way of explaining, like, who Domino is and what her backstory is and what her powers are. She explains that she has this power to affect probability, and then she goes on about a really weird way explaining it. And it's like, on the one hand, this is kind of stupid, just her talking to the dog like that. And it's fairly obvious what they're doing, that this is just a really sort of inelegant way of introducing you to the story and the character. And then I thought about something, and I realized that I have read a lot of either number ones or supposed jumping on points in the last, not quite a year since I've been reading comics again. And I've read so many comics that didn't do this basic thing. Like Marvel Legacy was just awful about this, about introducing you to what the character is, what their powers are, what their basic, sort of life and role is about. So even though, yes, this way of her talking to the dog is sort of forced and unnatural, it's still better than a lot of other Marvel books have over the past year. And then we get introduced to the main story, which some people were making fun of this too, that this idea of timber piracy, which is what she's called in to combat, that there are these Russian pirates, of course, that are stealing trees from the Pacific Northwest. And it turns out that Min Hedren was making fun of this, and he actually looked it up. It turns out timber piracy is a real thing It's not something you really think about, but it is a real thing. I don't really have a problem with that because, I don't know, it is sort of interesting to learn that that stuff like this happens. I mean, you kind of hear about weird piracy and things like that, and I don't know. Plus, this whole thing turns out to be a setup anyway, so it's not really that big a deal. So then we get our first full shot of Domino, and I don't know why her costume here is, like, wrinkly. I don't know if it's because of the rain or whatever, if the idea is that we're seeing her in if we're supposed to be seeing her in a less than flattering pose. In any case, she goes after these mean old Russian timber pirates here, and they have this mutant that's, like, tied up on the ground, and it turns out that the mutant can't control his powers, so he turns into this, this big monster-looking thing here. So she and Outlaw, who, I guess that's the other part of this story that may not be immediately apparent, is that, so Outlaw, not a very well-known character, not a very visible character, but her big moment, her big sort of time came years and years ago when Gail Simone used to write Deadpool. Right? But you may not know that, but Gail Simone used to write Deadpool, and then she wrote the spin-off series for Deadpool called Agent X, which Agent X, he actually briefly appears later on. I don't know if you can see him or not. Yeah, that's him right there, but you can't really get much of a sense of what he looks like. He's kind of... I was never able to fully understand the story about him. It's really, really complicated. The best that I could get was that he's kind of a clone of Deadpool, but not really. But he had the spin-off series that was written by Gail Simone, and he had these female assistants, one of whom was Outlaw, and I don't remember who the second one was. I don't know if she's in this comic or not. But yeah, that's kind of the meta story here that's not immediately apparent just by the words on the page. It's like Gail Simone returning to a sector of the Marvel Universe that she used to be a big deal in. But then, obviously, she went DC, she went independent, and so it's been a while. And that's kind of an interesting thing about Gail Simone, is that on the one hand, she was kind of a trailblazer for a lot of this SJW stuff. I mean, the whole reason she got into the industry was the Women in Refrigerators project, where she was complaining that, in her opinion, the comics were specifically misogynistic and promoted violence against women. Never mind that extreme violence in the late 80s and 90s was just the norm, that everybody was subject to these sort of shock value, big-time tactics, but for some reason, according to Gail Simone, women got the worst of it, and she somehow managed to browbeat her way into the industry by harping on that. But when she actually got around to writing stuff, whether it was Agent X, whether it was Secret Six, whether it was Wonder Woman, it turned out that she actually could really write. So I don't really consider her an SJW writer. At least in the sense of how she writes things. Maybe politics, that's another thing. But I think that her irreverent style, the way that she cultivated a fan base, the way that she got into the industry, even though she herself isn't an SJW writer, she sort of made a path for all these other people to get in, and for these other this element of the fandom to have more of a voice within the industry. So, yeah. But the fact that she was able to go to Twitter and call out some of the, not by name, but some of the writing that she was seeing nowadays, I thought that was big on her. So it continues with this sort of, LOL random sort of thing where, for whatever reason, Outlaw does a fastball special with Domino, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because, I mean, she's not Wolverine, she can't heal, she doesn't have an adamantium skeleton, she doesn't have a healing factor, so why would you send in Outlaw like that? I mean, maybe they used to do this a lot back when Gail Simone was writing Agent X. I don't know, I never actually read that series. It still comes off as... there's also a really stupid panel right here. Where is it? Yeah, right here. Where she gets thrown, or she dodges this truck, she goes in the mud, and she says, son of a bitch, mud right down the cleavage. And if you look right here, there's no way Mud can get into her costume from that. So it's like they wrote the script, and then David Baldeon came up with concept art later, and they didn't bother to change it. Oh, and while we're on the subject of pointlessly annoying things, I didn't see people pointing this one out, but it kind of annoyed me, is that you can see the you know, this is the first splash page of the character, this is how we're introduced to her, and it's, like I said, it's not a terribly flattering image. And then we get up to the top here, and I'm not sure you can see it, but it says, "Hello world, I'm your girl, Domino." That's a reference to the song "Cherry Bomb" by the Runaways, and it's like there's at least 2 big songs called Domino. One, of course, by Van Morrison, one, of course, by Jessie J, which is a more recent stupid millennial song. And I just, why would you use "Cherry Bomb" by the Runaways? It's just, I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy used it. Is that why you used it? It's just another thing that annoyed me personally. I don't know, it's dumb. But whatever. Anyway. That's whatever. So then we get to, I guess, what's actually the real plot of the issue, which is that Domino is getting a surprise party thrown for her. And this kind of gets at something, too, which is, and Diversity Comics was mentioning this in his Weapon X video that he did a few days ago, and I've known about this, or I noticed the same thing too, but I didn't know nearly as much about the sort of more extreme, you know, darker side of the X-Men universe as he does, so I couldn't be 100% sure, but hearing him say it kind of confirms it, which is that the Domino that's presented in Weapon X and in this book is a completely different version of Nina Thurman than was in the original, you know, New Mutants X-Force cable series. The original Domino was a very hard-nosed, very serious, very experienced mercenary that didn't take crap from anybody. She didn't do, you know, she hung out with Cable's six-pack. She was not somebody that was, like, cutesy. And here she's acting like, like Diversity Comics said, like a, you know, young 20-something party girl. You can see it in her facial expressions and her body language and a lot of her dialogue that she's just not acting like the hard-nosed mercenary that she used to be. And it kind of gets into it. You kind of see elements of her backstory here that they really don't go into this much, because I don't really know what they're referencing here. I mean, you see her getting the black splotch tattoo on her eye. You see her being apparently killed by Wolverine. I don't really know what this is a reference to, but you can see that she's got a dark past, and they just don't get into it at all. But I don't know if it's accurate to say that she's acting out of character, because it seems like it's the Marvel policy now that Domino is just completely different from how she used to be. And we get Dazzler, which, why does Dazzler have that haircut? So, you can see here this weird, like, kind of punk rock thing, but Dazzler was never punk rock. She was very, very mainstream. I mean, wouldn't she be more like a Taylor Swift type nowadays than an Avril Lavigne type? I don't know. So yeah, they spend a lot of time on this party thing. And I can't say I didn't get anything out of this. Like, this Deadpool joke here, I actually laughed at this. He says, I tried to get an Air Supply cover band, but all the agency had was the real Air Supply, so I said, screw that noise. That actually made me chuckle a little bit. And so then we get the end of the issue here, where this old dude and this woman who, she was mentioned earlier, she's this new character, I guess, named Topaz, who, for whatever reason, really, really wants Domino dead. And, well, it seems like she may actually succeed in that. So, like, this is actually like a genuine cliffhanger, and we don't know how it's going to end. You can read her dialogue boxes that she can't feel her powers. Normally she describes her power as sort of always being with her, but here she can't feel it. I mean, it's an actual cliffhanger. It's actually something going on, so, yeah, there's so many annoying things about this comic, like, just the dialogue, the way that characters are portrayed, the way that, situations happen, some of the, just elements of it. There's so many elements of it that are annoying, but the overall structure and the overall, like, story elements are actually, they're solid. They're good. They're there. I mean, you wouldn't think that a character introducing themselves like this would be like revolutionary, but it's more than a lot of supposed issue number ones and jumping on points that I've gotten in the last couple of years are, not just from Marvel, although Marvel's the worst offender, but from DC as well. Art that's actually dynamic, even if it's kind of cartoony. I mean, I don't know, this could be a lot worse if it had been written by somebody who was trying to be Gail Simone but wasn't. It would have been awful, but because it's actually written by Gail Simone, it's not the best ever, but I can picture it being a lot worse than this. And that shouldn't be something, but it is something. So I don't know. Tell me what you think of this. Tell me what you if you read this, tell me what you think. Tell me what you think about Gail Simone. In any case, this is Unranked Chevron signing off.